A man who has studied this closely and written very, I think, compellingly about it is our next and final speaker today. He is John Rossomondo. He is a senior analyst with another organization that has also been described as a hater, bigoted, Islamophobic entity. Of course, it's not true of the Investigative Project on Terrorism either. That organization, founded by Stephen Emerson, one of the most, I think, knowledgeable and articulate critics of the kind of agenda that Dr. Jasser just described. We've written a lot on it. Sharia, the threat to America, is one example. Jerry Boykin was the co-chairman of the Team B2 that put it together. A whole host of other books that describe how it's operating in our country, in the courts, in academia, in our culture, in our government. These are the sorts of threats to Muslims like Zuhdi, Jasser, and the rest of us, and must be resisted, as he said, not accommodated, let alone legitimated. And John Rossomondo, you've talked about what CAIR is up to, specifically in Connecticut, in this attack on Miles Prentice. Jim Simpson's made it clear this is part of a larger agenda. But discuss with us who else is playing ball with them in Connecticut and why Mayor Nystrom and the people of Norwich are being very badly served by those who are seeking to accommodate CAIR.
Thank you, Frank. I just wanted to say that I went and looked into the backgrounds of the CAIR Connecticut personnel who are leading the charge to force Mr. Prentice away from his baseball team. The current executive director, Tarek Alawadi, previously came from CAIR, Florida, where he represented the family of Ibrahim Todashev, who was an associate of Tamerlan Tsarnaev of the Boston bombing fame. He was shot by an FBI agent as Mr. Todashev was about to hurl a pole at a Massachusetts state trooper who was there to investigate him for an alleged involvement in a murder in 2011. This is just an example of CAIR being involved in trying to defend terrorists and to legitimize. The state of Florida looked into the case in 2014 and cleared the agent of any wrongdoing because he felt that he was legitimately in danger of his life because Mr. Todashev had hurled a coffee table at him. Then you also have to look at the background of this chapter. It's truly extreme. The last executive director of CAIR Connecticut was a guy by the name of Majid Dawadi, who posted a video by Abdul Majid al-Zindani, who is the spiritual director of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, on his Facebook page in June of 2017. Mr. Zindani also is on the United Nations list of specially designated terrorists. He was associated with Muslim Brotherhood spiritual leader Yusuf al-Qaradawi in a terrorism financing scheme for Hamas. He also called it the Union of Good, that is listed by the U.S. Department of the Treasury. And Zindani also was one of Osama bin Laden's mentors. And separately, Mr. Dawadi posted in 2017 on his Facebook page that the actions taken by Palestinian terror groups wasn't terrorism because it was basically legitimate resistance. I mean, then the current board chairman of CAIR Connecticut is a guy by the name of Farhan Mehman. He says that if you support Israel, you're a genocide supporter. And about a decade or so ago, Mr. Mehman represented a New York City broadcaster who put Hezbollah's channel Al-Manar and was prosecuted for material support for terrorism, and he was ultimately convicted of it. And he went and said that not allowing Hezbollah's propaganda channel on New York City cable systems was akin to not allowing CNN to broadcast in a foreign country. I mean, this is, and it goes on. You have Badr Malik, who was the founder of this particular chapter. In the 2000s, he defended the Muslims who rioted following the publication of their Danish cartoon. So, I mean, this is getting more and more cartoonish here. I mean, and then another person on the board is a woman by the name of Colleen Keyes. She's an academic and Islamic convert. She signed a pro-boycott, divestment, sanctions declaration with Sami al-Arian, who was a leader of Palestinian and Islamic Jihad, who was deported to Turkey. And so this is who this particular chapter is. I mean, but it shouldn't surprise anyone. If I can draw your attention to some court documents from the 2008 Holy Land Foundation trial. Right here I have in my hand the ruling from Judge Jorge Solis, who stated that the evidence provided in the trial created at least a prima facie case as to CAIR's involvement in a conspiracy to support Hamas. Then I can move on. A piece of evidence introduced in the trial was a phone list of all the leaders of the Palestine Committee of the Muslim Brotherhood, which CAIR was a spin-off of. It was created by the Brotherhood to support Hamas. That includes the phone number and name of Muise Abu Marzouk, who at the time in the early 90s was the political bureau chief of Hamas. And here we have the executive director of CAIR to this day, Nihad Awad, his phone number together with the former head of Hamas. Does he care to explain why his name, or what his name was doing with this Hamas leader? And here's another piece of evidence. It's a meeting agenda of the Palestine Committee from July 30th, 1994. It lists CAIR as a subsidiary organization of this Palestine Committee that was created to support Hamas. And, reading through the Norwich Bulletin article attacking Mr. Prentice, it says that cites the Southern Poverty Law Center saying that Frank is a bigot for talking about Sharia supremacism. Well, I have another piece of evidence, and they interviewed CAIR's National Communications Director, Ibrahim Hooper, who said we're all a bunch of bigots. Well, perhaps the Norwich Bulletin and Mr. Hooper should reread his own statement to the Minneapolis Star-Tribune on April 4th, 1993, where he said that he hoped that the government of the United States would become Islamic through education. He said that he couldn't, have an Islamic government right now because we didn't have an Islamic society. So, and then this is who CAIR is. And Jim mentioned Samuel Mesh, who runs the Washington Trust Fund that runs the $5 million of CAIR assets. Mr. Omesh in 2004 gave a speech to the Muslim American Society in Kansas, in Lawrence, Kansas, in which he lamented the assassination of the founder of Hamas, our beloved Sheikh Yassin, he said. And in my own research, in February of 2016, I found an open letter in Arabic that Mr. Omesh put on his Facebook page where he urged the Obama administration to support the Revolutionary Shura Council of Derna. Guess what? An internal document from Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb says that the Revolutionary Shura Council of Derna is theirs. It's part of them. And okay, so I mean, this is who the Southern Poverty Law Center has chosen to go to. I mean, they say, the Southern Poverty Law Center says that we're a bunch of bigots for just going and reading what these people say in their own words in black and white, and then turn around and say, well, the Southern Poverty Law Center also really screwed up last year. It lost a $3.4 million lawsuit for libel from Majid Nawaz, an English former jihadist turned anti-jihadist. And this particular document was the SPLC's field guide in anti-Islamic extremists. Well, this guy used to be an extremist, came around, so I guess that going from being an extremist to an anti-extremist is a bad thing. But let's look at who helped the Southern Poverty Law Center put this together. It's a group called Rethink Media, which was created by George Soros's National Security and Human Rights campaign, which has given at least $50 million over the past decade or so to different left-wing and Islamist organizations. And at the time this field guide came out, the Rethink Media had a woman by the name of Zainab Chaudhry, who had been CAIR New Jersey's civil rights director, in a position where she could have influenced the report. Well, when you look back to her time at Rutgers, she ran a radical Islamist publication called Nasiya that included pro-Al-Qaeda articles, pro-Hamas, pro-Kashmiri terrorist stuff. I mean, and then you go through Rethink Media, added Corey Saylor, who had been CAIR's head of their Islamophobia project last year in 2018. And if you look through different CAIR personalities, you'll see a close connection between Rethink Media. So this is who we're dealing with. And for anyone to take CAIR in the Southern Poverty Law Center seriously really needs to have their heads examined.
Thank you very much.